G'day, hi and welcome. Alright, today we're going to talk about tremolos. Which ones you should buy, which ones you should avoid, are they worth it, what's involved with it, and all those things. Now, I've owned about 40 guitars in my lifetime. Well, actually, I've owned 40 guitars in my lifetime. I don't have 40 right now. I've got I have 5 guitars right now. That's going to be for my nephew. But, yeah, I've had mainly non-locking systems and locking systems. So the difference between the non-locking system is basically, think like your typical Stratocaster, where it's just the tuners, a regular nut on the top, and you don't have any fine tuners down below. It's just a bridge with a bar and whammy bar. You can call it tremolo, whammy bar, thingamajiggy, whatever you want. Just don't call it late for dinner, right? Then this guy named Floyd Rose, back in the late 70s, early 70s, started experimenting with tremolos that wouldn't go out of tune. And a lot of people thought they were too good to be true, and there's no such thing as a guitar that doesn't go out of tune with a tremolo. But by jamming up the nut, yeah, these things will stay in tune. You can dive bomb the crap out of the whammy bar. Completely, have so much slack in the strings it'll go, they'll almost touch the floor, you know what I mean? And it'll stay in tune. But there's a little bit to getting them to work properly. One of the things you have to do is set them up. Now, it sounds like a daunting task, but really it isn't. Intonating a Floyd Rose is... it's all Allen key work, so it's not really hard to do, but it is slow and tedious if you don't know how to do it. Intonating a guitar and setting your bridge properly. A lot of people think you just put everything in a row. Don't do that. Don't do that. No, there is different string lengths, and we'll get a little bit of a close-up here. Different string lengths you can contend with. So you see, if you want to adjust each saddle, you pretty much have to loosen up the string to the point where you can get around in there with a nut, rather than a nice screw on the back like a regular saddle or bridge, where you can just, so it's a little more to get in there to get them sitting in the right spot. You got a lot of trial and error, so very time consuming to set up. The other thing is to make sure that the bridge, regardless of what tremolo you have, is sitting. You can see how the Floyd is sitting flush. If it's sitting too far forward or back, then either, if it's sitting back, it means that you don't have, when you're tuned up to whatever you're tuned up to. Let's say you're tuned to standard 440. If the tremolo is sitting back like this, then you need to put a little less tension on the spring so that it'll sit forward. If it's sitting like this, then you need to slacken off, or tighten the tension on the springs in the back to bring it down level again. Otherwise, your string height will never be where it's supposed to be, and then your intonation might be kind of funky as well. So that's one of the things that is a bit of a pain in the cons of a locking system. The other thing is that usually most tremolos, you end up cutting off the ball ends and just sticking the string in it. The plus to that is when you pop a string off of this guitar, if you leave enough meat of string on the end of your tuner, you just roll it down and you'd be surprised how long a set of strings will last on a... Because once you just stick the string and you tighten it down here, it's just, the string is just bent in there, the ball end is completely off of it, right? Now, one other big con to these things is these Allen nuts here. If you over tighten these, which I did with this one, that's why this one doesn't match the rest of these ones. And there is different numbers on these little individual saddles. There's like a 1, 2, and 3, and they're different heights. So make sure if you have to replace one. I was lucky. I went into Soundman Music, and they just happened to have enough spare parts sitting around. I bought it used. I can't remember what the guy, $2 or something like that. He made up a price on the spot, so it was pretty good. But yeah, those things are easy to strip out. So you tighten them enough that it'll hold the string, but not so tight. And this is the problem when you get your more budget end Floyd Roses. Floyd Rose, the design isn't really that much different mechanically from the cheap ones to the expensive ones, but the quality of the parts make a little bit of a difference, and the cheap ones tend to strip out very easy with that Allen nut. So just be very, very cautious when you are putting them on. The other thing too is your fine tuners here. You can see there's those buttons there. They're actual tuners. That's how you're able to tune the guitar. First you tune you undo the nut up here. Okay. And this is going to be indicative of all locking systems pretty much. You undo the nut up there. Okay, now once you undo the nut up there, unless you got a Steinberger or something like that, which is a little bit different, you tune up the guitar normal, then you lock down the nut, then you fine tune with this. So you always want your tuners, your fine tuners to be somewhere in the middle so that you have room to play up or down. If not, then you have to unlock it, readjust. So that's some of the. It sounds more complicated than it is, but once you go through the procedure once, you'll know what to do. Now, is Floyd Rose the best locking system on the planet? Well, it's better than a non-locking system. There's no doubt about that. There's a few design flaws with the Floyd in general, and there's different ones out there. But the big thing I never really liked is this. I'm trying to do here, and I'll show you. Okay. Wait for it. Okay. This little bushing here, okay, always seems to come loose when you're playing. So it seems like you can never get the arm to stay where you want, particularly on the cheaper ones. But on my Hammer Diablo, which was a bit better, you could tighten it and it'll stay back and like that. But that always seems to kind of come loose. So the goal is that you want the bar to stay where, when you want it out of the way, you could put it like that or whatever. But this tends to always seem to come loose. It's just the way they're designed. Although I never had a lot of problems with my other Floyd Rose on my other guitar when I had it. That nut never seemed to come off. But there's different types of tremolos out there. The Floyd is a pretty good system at the end of the day. I mean, Floyd Rose really lucked out when it came to getting every pretty much guitar manufacturer to adopt a Floyd Rose. But is there better out there than Floyd Rose? Hands down, if money's no object and the guitar can be outfitted with one, you really want a Shaler system on there. Those things are really good. But they're almost double the price of a Floyd Rose, where a Floyd Rose might be about $150 and up. A Shaler system is probably going to be about 200 and some odd bucks and up. And the Shaler's a lot more refined, but it also it requires a different cutout and stuff like that. So you can't just grab one and swap it out for the other. One thing, though, I got to say about the Floyd Rose is it does look pretty cool. It is a pretty cool looking machine. But the other system that I found that was really good is the Ibanez locking systems. They kind of have their own thing now. I think at one point they were a kind of a hybrid of a Floyd Rose and refined, and they got the plug-in arm rather than the screw-on arm. And I've always really liked the Ibanez locking bridge systems. They just really... And I found the Ibanez, however they set up their springs, whether you use 3 springs or 4 springs, it will change the dynamic of the bar, but I find the Ibanez, I forget the proper name for their bridge, whammy system, but they could do. It's easy to do the kitty purr with it, where you go like that. I find, especially with the lower end Floyd Roses, they don't do it quite as nicely or easily. They just don't quite spring as much. Now, there's other things you can do, and there's something you might not be aware of. But, like, for example, the arm on this one's like, say, medium aggression, where you can get ones that, go like this and then really angle up. And those ones are great for doing, like, the kitty purrs and stuff like that. Things like Steve Vai, so you can get that, or you can get less aggressive if you just want a light tremolo. But you can, get different, buy aftermarket bars for it. The other thing that's cool that the EVH guitar has on it's a Floyd Rose, same as this, only just a slightly better quality one, but he has the one with a drop D tuner on the very back. Now, I don't know if I could get away with it on this, but if I I would definitely put it on there, because that's really cool, because you can do a drop D and you just pull a button and you just push it back in and it goes, or you pull it out for regular tuning and you push it in for the drop D, as I think how it works again. Really cool, really, really cool. And it's just, you're basically just swapping this out for, I think the extra piece was like something like $50 or something like that. Definitely would be worth it for your primary guitar. I don't know, on a cheap guitar like this, it would be worth it putting on, but it's definitely a cool feature. So there is things you can do with them. Now, what's it like to live with a Floyd Rose or a locking system? I mean, there's more than just Floyd Rose and Shaler out there, and the Ibanez system, and obviously the Ibanez has its own patent and its own thing. There are a lot of unknowns out there, and you can go and see if you could try. And there's Floyd Rose, knockoffs. I've seen some where the string actually just hooks into it, and it's a little different, and it's easier to adjust and whatever. And I can't remember what brand it was, but it was just like a one-off of a Floyd Rose, and it was a direct replacement for a Floyd Rose and stuff like that. And it was like $200-300. I've seen all kinds of bridge systems and that, but the most common locking tremolo system out there is going to be a Floyd Rose. Again, how that guy landed all these guitar manufacturers to adopt that, that would have been a sale of the century, I'm sure. But overall, they are good systems. But living with them, when you play live and you break a string, the guitar completely detunes. Now, there are things you can do, and again, it probably costs you about $50. But on the inside, on the back, you can get, it's like basically like a stop. And you can attach it on the inside of the spring cavity on the other side of the, for those of you who don't know, there's basically springs holding the guitar. I don't think you could see it on this one. Oh, geez. Somebody forgot to put the backing cover on. I always tend to leave these. I leave the backing cover off on purpose, because every time you change the strings, you always gotta tweak it. There's some that you can get better. Like I say, this is a cheap one, so this is how you adjust the springs. You just loosen this out evenly, so each spring has whatever. But there's still provisions for 2 more springs on there. Not that you really need the extra tension, but it might smoothen it out. But what I was going to say, and this is something to notice, is that you see where this gap is right here, okay? There's like a bar that you could put in, and it installs so that if you were to break a string, it would become a stop, so that the bridge cannot go sharp on you, meaning you can only depress the bar. The EVH guitars like that, there's some Floyd Rose guitars where they don't have like this one here, you can push down on it, okay, no problem, but you could also pull up on it, and if you pull up hard enough, you can actually pop the strings out of it. But you could also get it so that it rests on the deck of the body, and I've seen guys do that so that when they adjust for their string tension, when it's tuned up, if you were to break a string, it would just act like a fixed bridge, but you can't pull up on the arm at all. You can only depress it. Most of the time, you're doing dive bombs anyway, so that's the compromise. So either, if you're going to live with a full floating system or a partially floating system, a full floating system is basically what you're looking at here, where you can pull up and raise the pitch, or you can push the bar down and lower the pitch. So dive bomb or raise pitch. Sometimes I like that raise pitch because you go, woo, it's kind of cool to go up and then just dive it down. Think like Diamond Darrell. He used to always do that. It was always his style tend to always be raise the pitch, and then it's like wow. So it goes up and then it comes right down, and that's cool too. But what you have to live with is when you break a string, the guitar is completely out of tune. And so it's noticeably out of tune to the point where finishing a song, if you could do it on like pulling one string back into tune and just play like a bass line, a simple bass line to get the song done, no problem. But you will have a string, all the strings are going to go sharp on you. Because when you a string breaks, basically the tension on the Floyd is now, instead of evenly, distributed amongst 6 strings, now you got that extra tension. Of the average string is going to be about 16 pounds of tension, 12 to 16 pounds of tension on average, give or take, depending on the gauge. But we'll say for 9s like that, probably about 16 pounds each. But what'll happen is you take one string away, now all the other strings have to take up that load, and of course that's what makes it go sharp. So if that is an issue for you, then you can go to like a depress or dive bomb only setup, and you can get like I say, if you want more reliability, but then you lose the whole full floating system. So you put that little stop block in there. I forget what they called it, but basically it just stops the bridge from being able to go sharp on you whenever you break a string. But then you can never do raise. But if you're doing string like open raise bends, you can still do string bends with your finger, right? But open raise bends you can't do it. So when you hit a harmonic and you want to raise the pitch and then drop it down, you can't do that anymore. So that's the thing about living with them. The other thing is it takes a lot longer to change strings with a floating system, because you got to cut the ball end off. You got to, like I say, tune it up a few times, stretch the strings, then play it for a bit so that it'll stay in tune. Then you lock down the system and fine tune again. And if you're, you want to do drop D, well, you got the lock nut on there. The only way around that is to get that other little piece. So if not, you're pretty much, you'd have to unlock the nut, do the drop D, relock it, and then go again. And live, you're not really going to have the time to do that. The audience isn't going to tolerate that. You taking an extra, 5 or 10 minutes to get everything done. It might not take you that long, but that is just kind of what it's like to live with them. But there are some really good ones out there. So try a few, see what you like. I can almost guarantee you're going to love the Shaler systems because they're so smooth, but they're not as pretty because they're a big block. They're really kind of chunky looking. But with the Shaler systems, you tend to get a lot more adjustment on them, or easier adjustment. With the Floyds, the other thing that usually goes on the Floyds over time, especially on the cheaper ones, is these two studs here. Basically, this whole bridge is held in place by spring tension and string tension. That's pretty much what holds it there. They just sit on these two, this is what you can raise the entire bridge system with, right? So these two posts here, okay, are just kind of notched for this to sit in. And after a while, they start to bind and stuff like that. And then once it starts to bind, it's you pretty much either have to replace the studs or the entire base plate of in other words, the thing is worn out at that time. Getting parts for them, you can get parts. They are fairly generic enough that everybody kind of makes their version. Like this, Jackson made this version of it, but it's by Floyd Rose. It's a patent. It's a Floyd Rose patent, but Jackson makes it in their. So it's just one of those things that you can get. You can get parts for them, but you have to hunt around a bit. Sometimes you can just order, probably off Sweetwater Music or something. I've never ordered from them, but they have a big site, or Stuart Mac or something like that. I've never ordered from them, but I've heard, pretty much all the guitar shops, when they order guitar parts, it's usually like Stuart Mac or someplace like that they order from. So you can get them parts for them. There's the other things too is, remember these little stop blocks in here, I don't know what the proper name for them, that hold your string in. They're just sitting there, so when you're changing your string, watch you don't lose them. You lose one, your guitar's SOL until you find one or get another one. So just keep in mind that the little thing there, there's a lot of moving parts on these things. They're not complicated once you understand how they work. They are pretty straightforward. It's not rocket scientist, but there's a little bit of time. Like every time you change your strings, you want to make sure that the setup is still good. If you change a different gauge of strings, you will have to change the spring tension in the back to compensate for it. So your bridge is setting, the proper. There are smoother ones out there than Floyd Rose. Again, try a Shaler system. You'll be hooked on it. But not a lot of guitars have the Shaler system. I don't know why. They're really good. Steinberger, they have their own thing where, because the Steinbergers, they have no headstock. It's, you put the ball end string on the end, and then there's like these knobs down there that you tune in, and then there's a lock on top of that, and it's a complete different proprietary system for that type of guitar too. But they do work extremely well. They're a weird guitar. If you've ever played a Steinberger, they're great guitars to play, but you feel like you're playing it, and you just always, no matter what, you never get over the where's the rest of this thing. You know, and then when you're sitting on your lap and you pull out that little thing to hold it on your lap, it's kind of like you're still like, where's the rest of this thing? You know, it's like it feels so small. But they are a cool guitar, and they were. I remember the few that I tried. They were very impressive locking system. They were smooth, very smooth. You know, these cheaper guitars, like under $400 or $500 or whatever, if it's got a Floyd on there, it's probably good. This one's pretty crude. It'll do the job. It'll do the job. But the other thing too, with a tremolo system, just keep in mind. I know I'm going on a little bit long on the on this topic, but one thing to keep in mind about tremolo systems too is you're going to give up a little of tone and sustain when you. Because the bridge is floating, it's not 100% anchored to the guitar body, so you do give up a little. It can deadify the sound a little bit. The other thing is, keep in mind that when you play really hard when you're recording, whether you have an expensive system or a cheap system, sometimes you'll get a bit of string phasing. So you'll actually, if you listen to Joe Satriani or Steve Vai, when they're picking really hard, you will hear a little bit of a tremolo in each note. I know once you hear it once, and I apologize to anybody that now has a tremolo system, because it might annoy you. And now that I've said it, you know what, you're going to be listening for it, and you're going to hear it all the time. But every guitar I've ever played with a floating bridge system, always, if you play really hard, you will always hear a slight vibrato at the touch of the pick. But it's not enough to, you know, it still sounds pretty good. But it's I'm talking about picking really hard or with really heavy picks or something like that. You'll get that. String phasing, you'll tend to get that if you have the pickups too close. But you get a bit of a string phasing when you pick really hard with even on a Stratocaster, it'll happen. So it's just something you got to live with. But again, most people won't notice it. You probably won't notice it unless you're really listening for it. Is what it is. But you have to play pretty hard. What it is as you're playing, you're slightly detuning. You're slightly vibratoing the bridge, which you notice more on the, actually, strangely enough, the guitars that actually have the smoother floating systems. You tend to notice it on those more because they're more refined, right, and they're more sensitive. So it's just, you're going to change the dynamics of your picking a little bit. And again, you might not get the same sustain and tone you're going to get with a fixed bridge. It just, you know, it doesn't mean it's going to sound bad. It just means it does. You don't get as much out of it. That's why a lot of people go with fixed bridge. The main reason why people don't give up on these things, I gave up on them for years, is after you play live and you bust a couple of strings live, it's like what you need is either, if you're going to stick with this type of system, your backup guitars need to have the same system, or a system on it that's ready to go, because you just don't have time when you're playing live to, you know, even in the middle of the set, you know, like, okay, I busted a string and I got to fix the guitar in the next set. Nah, just get a couple of backup guitars that have it, and then you can have a, you know, I mean, if you have 3 sets, you have a guitar for each set, you're good. You know what I mean? Or, you know, chance it with just 2 guitars. That's, you know, that's what I did. And very rarely I'd break a string, but sometimes it would happen. And when you break a string, you're pretty much immediately going to have to go to another guitar. The thing is that, yeah, you might get away with being able to finish the song on one string or whatever, but you're probably not going to be able to pull the guitar back into tune enough to really get some play chords or whatever once you bust a string. Unless you put in, like I say, that bridge stop thing in there, something like that. So that's just some things to consider before you get a guitar with a floating bridge system in it. And again, there's lots out there. There's more than Floyd Roys out there, but try a few of them, see which ones you like. If you can get a couple of different arms to experiment with, you might be surprised at how much it'll change the function of your, especially if you have a more aggressive or less aggressive. This one's not very aggressive. I want the more aggressive one because I want to be able to do the kitty purr with it there. I like that. Different springs, you can play around with that too, see what you like. If you like more springs in there at lower tension for a more dynamic feel, or just the 3 springs and at higher tension and stiffen it up a bit more. There is a lot you can do to tune these things up, and when you do get them really fine-tuned, they can be pretty cool. Obviously, all the whiz-bang tricks that you can do with it. But anyway, I didn't expect to go on this long, but it is a big topic. Just something that people might be considering. For new guitar players that are, you're just picking out your first electric guitar, but you've been playing long enough, you're going to stick with it. They might be a little bit daunting at first, but they're not impossible. Just get educated on how the system works so that you keep your guitar working properly. Especially if you're one of those people that change strings, different brands and stuff like that, different string gauges. These floating systems tend to like lighter strings, like 9s or whatever. If you're going to be playing 10s and stuff like that, you might have to play around with it a bit more to get it to function. I tried 10s on this because I tend to like 10 gauge strings and heavier. It was too much for the... Although I was able to set it, but I had the spring tension so high that I wasn't getting the dynamic out of it, so I had to go to the lighter strings. Years ago, I used to play with 8-gauge strings. Yes, you can get 8-gauge strings. I think there might even be 7s out there, but that's so ridiculously light, it's not funny. At 8-gauge strings, man, that was, whammy bar special stuff, if you ask me. Like, it wasn't that I couldn't deal with the tension of the 9s. I like the tension of the 9s, but there was something that the 8s give you a really thin sound. And if you're using a lot of effects and stuff like that, it can kind of clean up your sound a bit. The thicker the string, the thicker the tone. If you're playing straight through the amp, I prefer 10s and 11s. Playing with a lot of effects, 9s, it tends to take the muddiness down a bit. 8s were just completely, every note was just razor sharp and crisp and clear and stuff like that. But they were it thinned out the notes a bit. So it was just, you try different things. But every time you change a different tension of string, type of string, gauge, you got to readjust the if you stick with the same gauge and the same brand, you'll be okay. But if you're going to be changing, doing string experimentations, just keep in mind that you might have to tweak it a little bit. If you're sticking with different brands of 9s, you're probably going to be okay. But if you're going from 9s to 10s or 11s, you will have to readjust the proper tension on the springs. And maybe even re-intonate and all that. So, okay, so yeah, there we go. Geez, I didn't think it was going to be a half an hour discussion, but it is a bigger topic than I thought. But just things to keep in mind. There you go. So anyway, be sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you share, like it, and share the video. And if you find a system set up for a Floyd that you find just whiz bang works really great, by all means, share, especially for the newer people that haven't had experience with these things. Because some people won't buy them because they're too intimidated, but they're not really intimidating. When you get these, last thing I will say is, the only reason why you put these things on the guitar is because they're fun. Take it with that. Like, don't take it serious. Have fun with it. See what you can do. Yes, you're going to break a string from time to time. Don't be paranoid. You'd be surprised what strings will take, especially new strings. Yes, there's a bit of to keep them in tune. Yes, you got to stretch the strings very properly before you lock down the nut. There's all that little stuff, but the next time I change the strings on this, I'll document it, and you'll see the whole procedure of setting it up. And I did it before, but I'll do it again. And that way, for anybody, I don't know when I'm going to be changing the strings on this. These strings are probably about a year old or so. I don't know. If I don't break it, I just kind of keep them on there. It's different when I'm playing live, then I want fresher sounds, or if I'm recording, I want fresher sounds, but I'll live with it the way it is. But, just have fun with it. If it's not your main guitar, it's fun to have one that can do that, because It always gets people always love the dive bombs and the kitty growls and stuff like that. It's raised pitch stuff. The wow. Yeah, it's like, yeah, I always love the dive bomb stuff. It's like, woo, and then there's all kinds of crazy, silly stuff you can do with it. You can do the giggle, what I call the giggle tremolo. Wow. Yeah, yeah. So it's like, yeah, I like them, but they're just a bit more work than the fixed bridge. All right, anyway, there we go. Have yourselves a great day.